Hi, my friends. I do this work with all my heart for you. So please contribute generously to Future Primitive. Hello, my friends who listen to Future Primitive. Today, I'm happy to welcome author Robert Wagner. He is the past president of the International Association of the Study of Dreams, and for the past 10 years, he has been the co-editor of the online magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, the only ongoing publication devoted specifically to lucid dreaming. A lucid dreamer since 1975, he has logged more than 1,000 lucid dreams. Robert frequently speaks on lucid dreaming at national and international dream conferences, workshops, and college classrooms. Robert has been interviewed by CNN, CBS News, and ABC News. Let me also tell you that Robert Wagner has written a book called Lucid Dreaming, Getaway to the Inner Self. It is an account of the extraordinarily talented lucid dreamer who consciously sought out the principles of the dreaming realm. But actually, since we're fortunate to have Robert here, I'm not going to tell you more about his book. Just simply say, Robert, welcome, and tell us a little bit about where your book begins.
Thanks for inviting me, Joanna. It's lovely to be here. In the book, I give a little bit of my personal journey into lucid dreaming because I taught myself back in 1975 how to lucid dream when I was a junior in high school, and I'd been reading the book by Carlos Castaneda, his third book called Journey to Ixtlan. And so in that book, his shamanic teacher, Don Juan, tells Carlos that he wants him to become consciously aware in the dream state, and by finding his hands. And I thought about that because there wasn't really a technique in the book. It just was a suggestion to do this and just a little bit of conceptual illustration. And so that night, every night for the next 3 nights, I'd look at my hands before I'd go to sleep. And then on the third night, my hands just popped right in front of my face, and I realized I was dreaming. And it just blew my mind, the idea that I could become consciously aware within a dream.
Okay, so Robert, why is this important to you? Most people just sail along their life and consider that there's a great difference between dreaming and their life in the daytime, and they don't put the two things together or become curious about how these things intersect, the dreaming life and the waking life.
Right, and at first for me it was just fun. When I was consciously aware in the dream, I could fly around, I could walk on water, I could go through walls, I could talk to dream figures, I could just do about anything that you could imagine. And so at first it was just fun. But as I went deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming, I realized that there was actually a lot that could be done with this state. And in my book, I talk about this more deeply, but you can use lucid dreaming to emotionally and physically heal yourself. You can use lucid dreaming to explore the nature of dreaming, the nature of the subconscious mind, and how things are created. You can use lucid dreaming to contact your inner muse. You can get poems, work on problems, invent things. You can do all of that. But also, as you suggest, probably the most powerful aspect of lucid dreaming is the spiritual aspect, which is what I would call lucid living, where you take the information and knowledge and abilities that you gather in the lucid dream state and bring them into your waking life to live more lucidly, more aware, and more mindfully.
So, Robert, let's start with the first aspect, because many of us have, let's say, trouble living with our own emotions, or we're seeking to feel more joy in our lives. So the first part about emotions, how can we heal our emotions through lucid dreaming, or also create emotions that are more wonderful to us?
Right. So already in the field of psychotherapy, they're using lucid dreaming, some people are at least, to help deal with reoccurring nightmares that people have from post-traumatic stress disorder. So someone might be out in Iraq or Afghanistan, see some horrible things, and come back home and just have recurring nightmares every night. And obviously that's a horrible symptom to have. But what the therapists have discovered is that normally when you teach these people how to become consciously aware just one time in that recurring nightmare, normally the nightmare ceases and doesn't return. And so it's not to say that all of their problems magically disappear, but at least they regain the ability to sleep through the night and develop, that regain that skill again. So that's kind of the first level of how lucid dreaming has been used to help people with an emotional issue. What's happened, though, since my book has come out and since people have gotten more deeper into lucid dreaming, they've realized that you could use lucid dreaming to overcome phobias. For example, a woman wrote me that she wanted to come to a dream conference, but she had a fear of flying. And she asked me if lucid dreaming could help with that. And so I suggested to her that in her next lucid dreams, whenever she became consciously aware in the dream state that she was dreaming, she should just get on a dream airplane and see what it felt like, and she knew she couldn't be hurt because it was just a dream airplane after all. She told me a couple months later that she had done that in about 5 lucid dreams, and she started enjoying being on the dream airplane so much that when she woke up, she realized that her fear of flying had basically evaporated, and she bought a physical ticket to fly to this physical conference on an airplane, and she flew there and had a great time. So you can see that when you're consciously aware in the dream state, you can begin to work on these emotional issues, fears, recurring nightmares, the shadow aspect that Carl Jung and others have talked about. All of these things people are finally realizing can be addressed in lucid dreams.
So a question I want to ask you, there is, for instance, a very popular book by Eben Alexander called Proof of Heaven. And he describes remembering a state of being when he had supposedly he was brain dead, or a state of coma. What do you see a difference between the dream state and the state of coma or near-death experience?
Joanna, that's a wonderful question. I think actually that you might be onto something there. That there's another book by Jane Gockenbach, who's one of the early explorers into lucid dreaming. She's a professor up in Canada now. And in her book, she gave the account of a young man who was in a car accident and went into a coma. And he was in a coma for a number of weeks and had basically a lucid dream experience while in this coma, and also remembers coming out of the coma and returning to physical reality and feeling all the pain that his body still had, weeks after this car accident. And so when you're consciously aware in this mental state, whether it's dreaming or a coma or whatever it is, I think these are actually quite similar. In fact, one time I was giving a talk, out in Connecticut, And a woman came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I do that, what you're talking about." And I asked her, "You mean lucid dreaming?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, but I do it when I have narcoleptic episodes." So in narcolepsy, a person suddenly falls asleep when they're frightened or something happens and they just suddenly fall asleep. And so she'd say in her narcoleptic episode, she'd be consciously aware, knowing that her body had fallen asleep suddenly, and she was hoping that she hadn't hurt her head or got bruised up too bad. But she said she was just consciously aware in this mental state, and it had never occurred to her that she could go flying around or do anything. So it's interesting how these instances of coma and narcolepsy and lucid dreaming and even meditation on some levels, they all converge and give us a greater insight into this inner mental level.
And I would add, in my own experience, when I have taken teacher plants or psychedelic medicines, I have experienced some of the things that you describe in your book. Have you heard people speak about that?
You know, I've had a number of people write me and tell me that some of the things that I'm mentioning, especially with experienced lucid dreamers. So when you go deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming, sometimes you'll interact with aware light, or sometimes you'll interact with geometric forms. And so as you go deeper into lucid dreaming, it's quite wonderful and powerful, the experiences you have. And then sometimes you'll read the stories of people who have taken ayahuasca or other hallucinogens, and sometimes you'll be reading their stories and thinking, wow, that reminds me of a lucid dream I had one time. Mm-hmm. So I think that the beautiful thing about lucid dreaming, though, it's been scientifically validated since 1980 through the work of Stephen LaBerge in the U.S. and Keith Hearn in England. And also it's something that anybody can do. Normally when they do surveys of college students, about 70% of the students say they've had at least one lucid dream. And then when they ask, how many of you have a lucid dream each month, then of the group of college students who have had a lucid dream, about 20% of that group say that they have lucid dreams at least once a month. But the thing of it is, if you don't see the value in it, if it just seems like a kind of a Harry Potter-ish kind of imaginary world, you never really see the depth of it, the beauty of it, and also the therapeutic aspect of it, not only for emotional and physical healing, but also to re-inform you of a different way of looking at the world and looking at the nature of reality.
So to me, the really fascinating part of it and part of your book is that it might be, lucid dreaming might be a tool to study consciousness. And so I would like to ask you, what are your most recent thoughts and understanding about consciousness?
You know, John, I agree with you totally that lucid dreaming is a revolutionary psychological tool to study consciousness and also the nature of reality. Mm-hmm. The 11th century Indian Buddhist yogi Naropa called dream yoga, which includes lucid dreaming as a fundamental technique of dream yoga. But he called dream yoga one of the 6 paths to enlightenment. So it's really a tool, a technique to study the nature of the mind, the nature of reality, and to go beyond. But the problem is that I think we still haven't got to the point where psychology understands that lucid dreaming is a tool for anything. They realize it's kind of a tool for studying the dream state, and there's been neurological tests of lucid dreamers. So they signal with their eyes that they're lucidly aware, and then they'll get 19 channels of EEG data on it, or they'll have an fMRI going that'll show the brain operating during the lucid dream state. And so we have that kind of neurological data, But what people don't understand is the experiential data that a lot of lucid dreamers have discovered. And the curious thing about it, it's international. I've met lucid dreamers from all over, and the deeper they go, the more they begin to agree on certain principles of the dream state, certain guidelines that you have to be aware of, and also they have similar depth experiences as well. And so this seems to indicate that there's kind of a consensus reality within the dream state too, but you have to be lucidly aware in order to see that, and you have to talk to other experienced lucid dreamers and compare notes as well.
So for you, Robert, what are the most fascinating aspects of this consensus reality of the dream world?
Well, in my book, I have a chapter on mutual lucid dreams. And for a lot of people, this really kind of upsets them, the idea that two lucid dreamers could actually meet and exchange information in the dream state. But I think it's... if you read the chapter, you'll see that some experiments, personal experiments, have been done. That, to me, they seem quite compelling. And so it suggests that there's an inner dimension, whether you want to call it a collective unconscious or one of the many dimensions of string theory or something. But it does seem to suggest that another dimension exists. Now, I remember one time I brought this up on a lucid dreaming forum called lucipedia.com, and all the kids were very upset at the idea of mutual lucid dreaming or mutual dreaming. And so they asked me, well, first they said it couldn't happen, and I told them I felt quite confident it could happen. But then they asked me, well, what's the mechanism? What's the mechanism behind a mutual dream or a mutual lucid dream? And I told them, it's probably dream telepathy. Because you might not know this, but in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Montague Allman, who is a psychiatrist, and Stanley Krippner, who has a PhD in psychology, they did research studies that were funded by the NIH on dream telepathy and got some incredibly encouraging results, and it's all written up in their book, Dream Telepathy. So anyway, I told this to the group at lucipedia.com, and they told me that dream telepathy was just fake. And so I told them it wasn't fake at all, and that, in fact, I would be the telepathic receiver if they would get a telepathic sender and send me an image, a target image from a group of 10 target images that someone else would create. And so on the night they did this, and I recorded all my dreams, I submitted them, and the next night they revealed the target, or the next day they revealed the target image after I revealed my dreams. And all of my dreams were about restaurants and food and being served and food. And the target image was of a waitress in a restaurant. So I have the website dreamtelepathy.com, and so you can go there if you want to and click on an example of dream telepathy. But this really stunned a lot of these lucid dreamers because, especially when you're young, the entire culture devalues dreaming. I mean, dreams are just, they're Freudian, they're silly, they're emotional day residue, they're all that kind of stuff. But if you really learn how to work with dreams and how to work with lucid dreams, you realize that a lot of the comments by like Native American people and all about how they practically use dreams in order to get information about where to go buffalo hunting, for example, or where to find water during drought periods and all, that all these things to me seem very valid and very honest expressions of the capabilities of dreaming and lucid dreaming once you know how to get to that deep level.
Well, as I was reading your book, I was thinking about the nature of reality. And so what is the difference? What is the palpable difference between the day, so to speak, reality slash dreaming and the sleeping dream? Huh.
That's a wonderful question, and probably the troublesome answer is that there's not a whole lot of difference, so just to help people understand and to think about this a little bit more broadly. So if you happen to go to some Buddhist dream yoga monastery, in Tibet or Nepal or wherever, probably the first thing they try to convince you is life is a dream. Now I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yes.
I don't want someone to think that they're saying that life is not meaningful, or life is unimportant, or life is fantasy, or something like that. What I think they're trying to say, and how I would interpret it, is they're basically trying to say that your experience is largely a mental co-creation. It's a mental creation. And so I'll tell you how you can play around with this in the waking state. Oftentimes you'll hear people talk about the law of attraction, that you get what you are thinking inside, you attract to you by your thoughts and all. And so you can use that idea in the daytime. And so here's what you do. Take a quality or characteristic about yourself that you feel very neutral about. Very, very neutral. So like, you might think, well, I'm kind of attractive, but I'm not very attractive. So I'm kind of right there in the middle. I'm kind of neutral when it comes to attractiveness. Or I'm kind of funny, but I'm not really funny. So I'm kind of neutral in the funniness department. So then, in waking reality, about 10 times a day, tell yourself that you have incredible abilities and skills, and just enhance that ability, whatever you feel neutral about. So if it's about your comedic ability, just tell yourself 10 times a day, I'm the funniest person in this town. I'm the funniest person in this state. I am just funny, funny, funny. Just tell yourself that 10 times a day. And I'll tell you, within 3 or 4 days, people will start laughing at things you say that you didn't even intend to be funny. And all of a sudden, you'll realize that from within your mind, within your mental radiation, you're sending out subliminally and telepathically a message that you're the funniest person in the city, and it'll start to show. That's when you'll realize that your daytime life is largely a mental creation of those thoughts and ideas and feelings that you have within yourself, and you can use that to begin to break through and start to see things, I feel, much more truly.
Okay, and how do you transfer that to the dream state, the sleeping dream state?
There is something that I call developing a lucid mindset, and this idea kind of came out of the work of Paul Thole, who was a Gestalt German psychotherapist. But back in 1959, when he was a university student, he began to wonder, could he become consciously aware in the dream state? And so about 10 or 15 times a day, he'd ask himself, am I dreaming right now? How do I know? And so he took it very seriously. He'd walk around all the time. He'd stop at the stoplight, and then he'd look around. Am I dreaming right now? How do I know? And so within a month after doing that, he was in a dream. He saw his deceased aunt, and he thought, wait a second, am I dreaming right now? How do I know? And he said, my aunt's deceased. This must be a dream. So he became lucidly aware. Mm-hmm. Now you can do this also if you have that kind of law of attraction idea, or you create your own reality idea. So if you think throughout the day, whenever a strange experience happens, what did I do to attract this to me? What beliefs, thoughts, and ideas do I have that brought this into my experience? If you begin to ask yourself that 10 times a day when you see something strange happen in your life, suddenly you'll be in a dream, you'll see a giraffe walk by, and you'll think, wait a second, how did I attract this into my life? What thoughts and beliefs and feelings did I have that bring this into my life? And you realize, oh, that's just too strange. Giraffes don't walk around Chicago. It must be a dream. And so this is how a person can develop a lucid mindset what I mean there is you're examining your current experience or examining the current state of your mind. But if you start to do that during the day, it'll continue over into the dream state, and it'll help you become lucid quite frequently if you practice it deeply enough. And it also show you about the nature of reality, because then you'll start to see that the nature of reality is fundamentally a co-creation of both your waking ego mind and your larger unconscious mind acting together.
That's right. What I hear you saying to us is that the more we become observers of our own consciousness during the day, perhaps the more we will be able to be aware that we are conscious while we're sleeping.
Right, exactly. The greater awareness you have during the day, the greater your awareness will be at night and in the dream state. And that's why practicing these techniques, developing a lucid mindset, can really help a person become aware in their dream and realize they're dreaming. And from there, if you know what to do, you can really accomplish some just incredible things.
Mm-hmm. Tell us, Robert, what is the most interesting experience you've had in a lucid dream?
Wow.
Interesting, useful at the same time.
I'll tell you why I named my book Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self, because I feel in lucid dreams, everyone has the capacity to interact with their larger awareness, or their self with a capital S, as Carl Jung might have written it. And so what happened, Joanna, is back in the mid-'80s, I was part of a correspondence group on lucid dreaming, and every month we had a goal to achieve. And 1 month the goal was pretty simple, actually. It was ask a dream figure what it represents. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, that's a pretty simple goal. I can do that. And so one night I fell asleep. I became consciously aware out in a parking lot. I followed a woman into an office building. And when I was in the office building, I remembered, I need to find out what a dream figure represents. And so I looked around the office setting, and there were 4 people there, and I focused on this one guy who was wearing a 3-piece suit with a gold watch and all. And I walked up to him, and I go, "Excuse me, what do you represent?" And then the strangest thing happened. Instead of the dream figure responding, a voice from above him boomed out a response. And it didn't make sense at first, and so I asked the voice again, we'll explain that a little bit, and then it boomed out a more thoughtful, comprehensive response, and I realized, okay, that's what this dream figure represents, and I woke up and wrote it down. But what happened after that, I realized, what if behind the dream there's an awareness, a non-visible awareness? And so I began to play with that idea in my next lucid dreams. I would stop what I was doing in my lucid dreams. I'd ignore the dream figures. I'd ignore the dream setting. And I would just shout out questions to this non-visible awareness behind the dream. And suddenly it started to boom out responses. Sometimes if I would ask to experience concepts, like once I had been reading the book by Jane Roberts called Seth Speaks, which is channeled material, of course. And in the book, there's this idea that people have a feeling tone. And in the book, it says the feeling tone is the essence of yourself in this lifetime. And I kept wondering, well, what is a feeling tone really? Is it more sound, or is it Or is it more feeling? What is a feeling tone? So within the month, I became lucid, and I just ignored everything that was going on around me, and I shouted out to the awareness, "Hey, I want to hear my feeling tone." And at that moment, something really strange happened. About 50 or 60 feet above me, a little black dot appeared, and from it came this incredible sound, very softly, this ah sound, this ah. And as I watched, this sound kept getting bigger, and it formed a cone of vibrating sound. And this cone kept getting bigger and bigger as I heard this ah just keep getting louder and louder. And finally, it basically vibrated me out of existence, and I kind of more or less ceased to exist as an identity. And so that's the beauty of lucid dreaming. Not only can you use it to access creativity and emotional healing and explore, the nature of the mind and consciousness, but you can also, if you know how, you can interact with the awareness behind the dream and ask to experience concepts. It's just amazing the stories that people send me of their lucid dreams when they ask to experience a concept. Like this week, a young man wrote me from down in Houston, Texas, and he told me that he heard me speak, and in one of his next lucid dreams, he shouted out to the awareness behind the dream, "Let me experience divine grace." And he said, all of a sudden, this kind of vortex portal appeared in front of him, and he got sucked into it and had the most incredible experience he's ever had in his life, because he just asked in that setting to experience a concept. And it's amazing. I think it just shows you the nature of this larger awareness. It's incredibly vast. The Castaneda books called it a silent reservoir of knowledge. And they called it a silent reservoir because you had to touch it. It could not touch you. You had to reach out with your intent to it, and then it would respond. And so that's why I called my book Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self, because if nothing else, everyone who's a lucid dreamer, even if you just had 10 lucid dreams, you ought to be able to have an encounter with this larger awareness, this inner self that all of us have.
Robert, I have a funny question for you.
Good.
You said that this person who wrote you said that they shouted at, let's call it the awareness, and it's a booming voice. Can you tell me why you have to shout and why it's booming?
And I'm glad you brought that up because this young man also told me that he had another experience, and in that particular experience, a dream figure came up to him and told him that he really didn't need to shout. and so I think you're onto something there, Joanna, that you knew you didn't have to shout, but the fundamental thing is expressing your intent, and normally when I become lucidly aware, I just look up at the sky, and it probably doesn't matter, but I just look up at the sky, and I would just shout out my intent, just to be sure that it was heard and recognized. But I don't think you have to shout at all. And in fact, for this gentleman, his self gave him a message that shouting wasn't necessary.
That's amazing, because that brings me to the subject of love, which is the thing that fascinates me most. And then I would play with you saying that lovers tend to whisper at each other. So, what have you found out about love with this investigation and this journey that you're on?
I think something that almost all lucid dreamers discover is the power of love. And so this is how it gets expressed in a lucid dream oftentimes. I remember once I became lucidly aware, and suddenly I noticed that there was a big black dog there, like a Doberman Pinscher, and it was kind of snarling at me, and so I realized that it was some angry aspect of myself or some shadow aspect, like Carl Jung might talk about, and the shadow aspect, Carl Jung called them the shadows because it was kind of the denied or ignored or repressed parts of yourself. And so what I realized is that in these kind of situations, you have to decide how do you want to respond. You know, you could respond out of some sense of habit. You could run away or fly away or do whatever. But I've realized in lucid dreaming that if I'm going to develop kind of an inner harmony, that I need to make peace with my inner dream figures. And so in this particular case, I just projected love and compassion onto this dog. And suddenly it began to transform, and I think it basically became a little dachshund or wiener dog like we used to have when I was a kid. then I bent down and picked it up, and we went flying around the dreamscape and had some good time. But you'll see this consistently in lucid dreamer reports that when they experience frightful, dream figures or aggressive dream figures, if they can think about it more deeply and project love and compassion, normally the dream figure is suddenly transformed into something much, much nicer, and it can be powerful to see that, because that's also something you can do in your waking life as well. When you're in a situation where someone's angry or aggressive or something, if you just mentally project love and compassion onto them, or understanding or sympathy, it'll dramatically change the waking life situation as well, 9 times out of 10.
Well, you see, that's what I'm getting from you and from studying you through your book. I personally am grateful that the greatest experience in my lifetime is that I have understood that I can influence, I can look at the contents of my thoughts. I can really look at the whole landscape of my thoughts and feelings, and I can decide which ones of these thoughts I want to pursue, which ones I want to change, which feelings I want to modulate in my waking life. And what I'm hearing is that you're saying we can do that when we are asleep as well.
Exactly, and it's so important how a person, what they focus upon and how they decide to respond. And so I love your idea of looking at a landscape and deciding what you're selecting from this kind of mental atmosphere, and bringing that forward, and instead of just being ruled by habits or philosophies or whatever, you actually consciously and mindfully select how you want to approach it.
And that you're saying that we can have, we can make art. Like, I see this as the art of living in my waking life, is to paint the picture that I choose to paint with my life. And you're saying that we can do that in our sleep as well. We can, so to speak, paint our dreams.
Exactly. It shows you the creativity in a lucid dream. It shows you the creativity of your thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, and how if you use them in a masterful way, you can create incredible things, and also even access art and creative inventions. I used to have a kind of a radio show on Iowa Public Radio. Mm-hmm. And one time the show was on dreaming, lucid dreaming, and creativity. And I'll never forget, a gentleman called in who said he was a writer who had graduated from the Iowa Writers Workshop. that Kurt Vonnegut used to have. And he told me that, and he told the whole audience that whenever he had trouble writing a novel and got stuck, he'd try to have a lucid dream. And when he'd become lucidly aware, he would call the novel characters to him in the lucid dream, and he would ask them, what's wrong with this novel? And he said oftentimes the dream figures who were the novel characters would tell him exactly what was wrong and what needed to be done to make a better novel. And so you could imagine some novel character telling him in a lucid dream, oh, you never should have killed Mary in chapter 3. Mm-hmm. You know, we need her at the end of the book to explain everything. Mm-hmm. And it just shows you that when you become consciously aware, if you know how to approach it in the dream state, you can call on that inner creativity, and it'll come to you and give you creative ideas, creative resolutions, and just really drop creativity on you. And it's a beautiful thing to see.
Mm-hmm. It brought to my mind the words you only live twice. I mean, you live in your daytime and you live in your nighttime, and there sort of seems to be a racism where we are taught to say to ourselves, oh, I live in the daytime, and then once I'm asleep, I'm not really alive anymore. I mean, I'm not really alive in real life anymore. And so what you're saying is that we can be so much richer because we are living 24 hours a day.
You know, it's a beautiful way of thinking about it, and also it reminds me that oftentimes when you'll hear a Buddhist dream yoga practitioner talk, that basically the idea of dream yoga, or one of the ideas, is that through your lucid dreaming and those kind of experiences, it'll prepare you for the time of death. And so at that time of the near-death experience, because you've had so many engagements in the lucid dreams, you'll be ready to engage that next state, that next bardo state. And also I remember reading once, I think it was Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, said that at that moment, an experienced dream yoga practitioner or lucid dreamer will know that if you go with the relatives who come to greet you in that near-death experience, that then you'll likely be caught up again in samsara, in a reincarnational rebirth and a new life. And he said, but if you've been experienced in dream yoga and lucid dreaming, you'll probably understand that the actual awareness, the light, is what you really want to move towards, and even though it's not objectified as people or places or things, you realize that fundamentally it's that light, that's the aware thing, it's the consciousness, it's the aspect that you want to move towards. And so it's kind of beautiful when you look at lucid dreaming. It's not only is it about becoming more lucidly aware in life, but it's also about becoming lucid in your passing. And when you read books like the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sagyal Rinpoche and others, to me, it's almost something that you're saying to someone who's passed on. You're basically giving them lucid dream advice after they've passed away about how to relate to the hallucinations around you, you know, how not to fear the wrathful figures, you know, how to concentrate and focus on what's essential and clarify your mind in the process. So it's incredible the depth and wonder of lucid dreaming.
How to be awake in the dream bardo.
Exactly. Yeah. And also how to be awake in the waking bardo, and how to be aware in the bardo.
Yeah.
So in all of these, you realize that these techniques and understandings about awareness and about mindfulness and and all, how valuable and fundamental they are. And also understanding how your thoughts, how your habits, how your feelings and all get expressed out from you and projected out into the environment. But when you realize that you're a co-creator of the reality you're experiencing, then you'll realize that the issue isn't out there. It's really inside of you. It's inside your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, and that's where the real work has to occur.
24 hours a day co-creating. That's right. Robert, I have a last question for you. What about the awareness of the nature that we are speaking about, the trees and the oceans and the rivers? What have you learned about our interaction with the awareness of the planet?
Right. So Joanna, I write in my book how after 20 years of lucid dreaming, I realized that I had to go beyond lucid dreaming. I realized that my beliefs and thoughts and emotions and all were projected out there in whatever experience I found myself in. And so I began to wonder what would happen if I had no beliefs or I had no thoughts or emotions. How could I get beyond that and beyond lucid dreaming to the source of all this incredible creativity? Mm-hmm. And that's when something really phenomenal happened, and each night I'd go to sleep, and a lot of times all night it'd be nothing but blue light. And when I would wake up in the morning, I'd think, well, gosh, what do I put in my dream journal? Blue light, because there was no me, there were no dream figures, there's no objects, there's no action, there's nothing but blue light, and so this kept occurring. And I remember one time after it occurred, my wife asked me the next morning what was happening to me, and I asked her why she would ask, and she said she woke up in the middle of the night, and she said she felt like she looked at me and she'd never seen someone who was in such utter bliss. Mm. So I was going really deep, and the story is much more involved. A person can read it in the book, of course. But what occurred to me after this whole set of experiences that was quite profound is that we exist within an interconnected oneness, that all of this is connected, that the tree is alive, but also the nail in the house is conscious and alive. And you begin to realize that everything, even space itself, is conscious and alive. And so after that, I realized that I exist as part of an interconnected oneness, and we all exist as part of this interconnected oneness. And the Buddhists call it non-duality. But another word for non-duality, I think, is oneness. There's no separation. There's no other and I. It's a oneness. It's an interconnected oneness. So in the final chapter of my book, I give a story of being in Havasu Canyon in the Grand Canyon area, mm-hmm. and I'm sitting there in the creek, just kind of blissing out because the water's just so cool and rich and beautiful. And so I reached out to the canyon because I truly believe that I exist in an interconnected oneness and everything's conscious and alive. And I reached out into the canyon and I asked it, so canyon, what do you have to say to me now? And I heard as clearly as I'm talking with you, get out while you still can. And I remember that morning, at that moment, I sat up in the creek and I thought, well, wait a second, what's going on here? Am I hurting a rock or sitting on a plant or something? And I thought, oh, it was just a strange auditory event. So I got relaxed again, sitting in the creek, and I reached out to the canyon once again, and I said, canyon, what do you have to say to me now? And it told me, get out while you still can. And so I stood up in the canyon, and I told my wife and some of the people that were there with me that we had to go. We had to get back to the boat and go down the Grand Canyon. And they asked me why, and I didn't have a reason until suddenly I looked up in the Slot Canyon and saw the teeny tiny corner of a giant thunderstorm, that blackness of those clouds. And I realized that there was going to be a flash flood in this canyon. And a few minutes later, the crew from the boat came running up the trail and told us to get back to the boat because there's going to be a flash flood. And so that's what I wanted to point out, that everything, if you reach out to it with the right heart space and with the right understanding, everything can respond, because everything fundamentally is conscious and alive.
Well, I'm going to be I'm going to take a big leap here, but the beauty of it to me is that I hear that your experience in Havasu Canyon connecting with the consciousness of nature was as blissful as the blue light you saw in your dream.
It's nice of you to say it, but I truly do believe that if we understood that we existed within an interconnected oneness, that we'd treat each other, we'd treat the environment, we'd treat every relationship we have with much more respect and understanding and sympathy.
Well, as you and I have in this conversation, and I want to thank you with all my heart for being so present for us during this time.
Oh, thank you, and lucid wishes to all of your listeners, and I encourage everyone, if they have an interest in this, to explore it. And even if they themselves don't have a facility for lucid dreaming, if they talk to their nieces and nephews or their children and grandchildren, they might find that in the family they have a lucid dreamer in the making.
Okay. All right, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanna.